We've heard a lot about the Minnesota Vikings defense dominating, getting sacks, but we haven't heard a lot about Donovan Jackson specifically this camp. I'm going to try to change that today. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate you all so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Today on the show, I want to start with a little talk about Donovan Jackson. We'll also do our JJ McCarthy review. We had an interesting week of camp. Some fights broke out. JJ McCarthy had some interesting moments. We'll talk a little bit about the, your sort of requisite daily JJ McCarthy update. And then there's also maybe a couple of interesting depth chart things brewing. So we'll keep tabs on all of that. But first, the main topic of the day is going to be Donovan Jackson. There are two things I want to go over with Donovan Jackson that I noticed in some camp video that was sent to me that I broke down on my Patreon page, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL, from the day that there was a fight in. That was what I guess happened, there were some tensions already that were going on in the O-line, D-line, like one-on-ones. So like the trenches were already kind of hot. And things were, I guess, just a little bit spicy in the air because after a run, there's sort of a weird tackling situation that sort of guys like go to the ground. And then Brian Asamoah just lays out Aaron Jones. That leads to a whole scrum. And then like the next play, there's another scrum and like everybody's just mad. That's the sort of tension you get when you're like deep in the dog days of camp. It's hot. You've been hitting the same guy over and over. You're just sick of that guy. And you get a lot of, that's when you get a lot of the fights. And that's when the joint practices really come in handy because it's nice to like hit somebody else, or a preseason game, which there is this Saturday. There is a preseason game against the Houston Texans, in Houston, I believe. So get excited for that. They get to hit somebody else. Probably not going to see a lot of the ones in that one. That'll be more of a backup thing, which, we'll talk a little more about what's going on with the 2s and 3s because some interesting stuff's going down. But somebody was kind enough to send me some videos of those plays so that I could actually see Donovan Jackson in a more holistic sense. Like this, I think, was a decent amount of the plays that the first team offense ran in 11-on-11s throughout the entire game or the entire practice. So I think I felt like I got to see a little bit more of at least one practice. It's still just one practice, and they've only been in pads like 3 or 4 days. So everything you're hearing about the trenches, is still very early days, right? We're still halfway through the first quarter. Nobody's going to declare a game over, right? The question remains, how is Donovan Jackson doing? You can't really see a lot of the O-line in a lot of what the fans have been able to see. They've kind of put the O-line, D-line on the backfield, and then they put the wide receivers in the corners and stuff, and the 7-on drills and stuff where people throw touchdowns in front of the fans. So if you wanted to sit there and watch the O-line, you kind of need binoculars to do it, but in the 11-on-11s, you get a sense. So there are two major points that I want to make about like technique that you can surmise. But on the whole, Jackson did pretty well. There were a couple of L's that he took that we'll talk about why those happened, but I thought he did pretty well. The mobility is really nice. You can really, like, especially on the zone runs where you're seeing where he has to, race a guy to a spot and he has to like keep a certain distance. You have to stay out in front of a guy. So you have to move. He can definitely move. The strength, the grip strength, the upper body strength comes in handy a lot. And again, I'll talk about where that happens. But I guess I'll put it this way. I don't think he was the best lineman out there. There were definitely some L's and stuff happening to him that you weren't seeing happen to like Brian O'Neill, right? But he also wasn't the worst lineman out there. That's probably just in school, which I guess you would expect. And he definitely looked better than what we have seen from Blake Brandel like last year. he's playing among the ones and he looks like he belongs there, is I guess maybe the best way to put it. So he also is not trading any reps with Blake Brandel, even though Will Fries is now like full-time in at right guard and is arguably been playing worse than Donovan Jackson. There were a couple of moments of Will Fries, but that's also like, it was like newness to the scheme. The mistakes that I saw from him were more like, oh, he was supposed to peel off and get that linebacker. He didn't know he was supposed to peel off and get that linebacker. That's the stuff you want to kind of be seeing in camp and like ironing out, but not just like getting smoked or whatever. But I think everybody on the line has had their fair share of getting smoked. From, Jonathan Allen. Jonathan Grenard has been completely unblockable still in camp. There was a whole article at the Star Tribune about like his motivation and how the sour taste from how last year ended and stuff. And it reminds me a lot of the articles you would hear about like Xavier Rhodes before he would have this crazy season, or like what Harrison Smith would say before he would get like 8 picks in a season. I do think Grenard is in for a big year. He was good last year, and then you get that second year, free agent bump thing that kind of tends to happen. I think Grenard's in for a pretty crazy one. He's giving up all those signals of a guy that's about to just go off. But I'm getting distracted. Oh, so Donovan Jackson has taken some L's. The first rep of the day was an L to Jalen Redmond. That happened for a reason. There's one of the 2 main points I want to make. And it's that he leaves his upper body, his torso open because his hands are a little slow. He needs to stop thinking like a tackle. And, hey, look, he played tackle for the last part of his college year. So his brain being still in that kind of mode is okay is understandable. And the difference is, so at tackle, when you decide to shoot your hands is a timing game. Right? You shoot him too early, you get him countered. You shoot him too late, you let him get the first contact on you, right? So you have to be reactive. You have to do the timing. Maybe you want to flash your hands. You've got 3-4 steps of a kick step that like, as the D lineman is setting up their pass rush, you're setting up your angle to it. And there's kind of a cat and mouse. There's kind of a game of chicken. Who's going to throw their hands first? Who's going to make their move first? It's a very timing based game. On the interior, you are exploding out of your stance and you're hitting the heck out of a guy. It is so much more about quickness and explosion and about getting that contact to happen fast. So if you are being like too delicate about this, if you're being very patient and deliberate with your hands, the guy's just going to get their hands on you right away. So that's what Jalen Redmond does in this rep. It's the first one in the Patreon video if you watch it. And what he does is he gets his hand right on the collar of Donovan Jackson's pads. And it's just a push-pull, right? You push him to get him off his balance. You pull him down to get him off of you. And then a quick step to the side and you're right in, and it was a pretty easy, probably would have been a sack. That was how he started the day. Rough start to the day. However, the way to fix this is to make first contact. This is a Jim McNally thing and all of those of his ilk of the Alex Gibbs tree and everything. But Jim McNally screeches on Twitter about this all the time, about, first contact wins. You must make the first contact. And he always teaches offensive linemen in pass protection to actually play long, like use a long arm like you're a defensive lineman, if only because if you can get one strike on a guy, you can slow down their momentum a little bit and disrupt the timing of their move, or maybe even get control of them. If you can grab them, you can bring your other hand, your other arm in, and your hips will be loaded up, so your hips will come through. It's a philosophy I agree with, so I get really excited about it. Versus some people that will teach, no, keep yourself square all the time, keep your shoulders, lined up with your hips, and always shoot with 2 hands. I think that's just a little inflexible, but there are very, very prestigious O-line coaches that teach it. I just happen to fall in a different camp, but this is very much a 2-sided story. But when you give up the inside like that, all that upper body strength doesn't matter anymore because you don't have any leverage. The way I'll describe it is, get a friend and have them try to resist you as you push them, and put your hands right on their collarbone basically and push and feel how hard it is to push them. Then put your hands out on the side of their shoulders and then try to push and feel how hard that is. It's going to be hard. It's awkward, right? Your hands slipping off. You're not using the same muscles, you've got to squeeze a little bit. It's way harder. You don't want your hands to be out to the outside unless you're specifically doing something like hug technique that like calls for that and is a totally different can of worms. The other point I wanted to make is a positive one, and it's one that I think led to a lot of wins for Donovan Jackson in Ohio State, and you're still seeing it here. And it's about flexibility and how that lends itself to wins, especially when you're out in space on like go get the edge, outside zone kind of runs, and how you can definitely see it in camp. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. If you are a golfer, then you're familiar with that lull you hit kind of in the middle of the back nine where you suddenly get a little tired and your swing doesn't quite come through the same way, and maybe you rush a putt because you kind of just want to go sit down. You can't have that, right? That's going to be how you give up a really good round or make a bad round even worse. I used to work at a golf course, and I started there in 2006. It was just a couple years after 5 Hour Energy hit the market as a product, and it was like very much the new novel thing to do, and golfers are still doing it. Bring out 5 Hour Energy and knock that thing back as soon as you feel that lull. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off of your order. 5 Hour Energy Transfusion is a grape, ginger, and lime flavored version of your favorite golf drink minus the alcohol. Once again, that's promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off of your order at 5hourenergy.com. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. Moving on with today's episode, Locked On Vikings. Again, go to patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL if you want to see some more of that Donovan Jackson stuff. But the next thing I wanted to mention that kind of came up a lot when I was looking at that was the flexibility and dissociation between your hips and your shoulders. And there's a really unmeasured athleticism to that. This does not show up in anyone's combine drill or relative athletic score because there's no real flexibility tests, but it's incredibly important to be able to point your shoulders a certain way, where especially these big wide framed guys, I have the shoulders of a Victorian child, but imagine like a football player's shoulders, being able to move them a certain way and at the perfect angle so that they're the biggest, widest wall imaginable, while also keeping your hips pointed in the direction they need to be pointed in so that you can move the way you're supposed to move. Those are not always the same direction. Sometimes you got to be moving one way but walling off another way, and being able to dissociate your hips and your shoulders makes you kind of able to get the best of both worlds. This is something that Donovan Jackson exhibited a lot in camp. It's a very subtle thing. It's not the most important thing about a lineman at all, but it's cool, and it led to wins. In particular, tosses to his side, where you have to hook somebody, right? You have to get out and around somebody, or in a lot of cases, it depends on the defensive front, but in a lot of these cases, it was somebody that started behind the play of him, right? So he was to the play side of them. And that means he had a head start on where they're supposed to go. If they're going right to left, he's a little bit further along that track. And that led him to be able to maintain that lead by having his hips pointed play side while he's still working play side, but then also turn his shoulders and be able to start slowing that guy down and prevent him from ever catching up. It sort of works in the same way as like a NASCAR, like just sticking right in front of somebody so they can never, ever get around you. It's sort of that same mechanic, that same spatial idea. But it led to really cool looking wins. And I think just the general run blocking was really sweet. There was a double between him and Ryan Kelly on Levi Drake Rodriguez, who is, by the way, firmly with the twos. There's one of your interesting depth chart things that was he just sledded the guy to absolute hell and back, put him right into Brian Asamoah's lap, and Asamoah hadn't like made a decision about his gap yet, which is a problem for him, and it, it just cooked both of those guys. And, hey, that's the ones against the twos. You expect a little bit of that, but that was, I think, a more dominant rep than the expectation even would be, like even after adjusting for the fact that these are the starters versus the backups. That was still dominant. And there was actually a rep later in the practice against Jalen Redmond, who got that sack on him in the push-pull, where he managed to get his hands on Jalen Redmond first, win that upper body battle, and then the push-pull didn't do anything because you had enough of a grip on his collar where when he tries to pull you down, you can just sort of pull yourself back up by his leverage and just kind of hang on for dear life and he can't go anywhere. That's a really good way to get a win in pass protection. And by the way, if it sounds like I'm describing holding, I think letter of the law, I am. But the way that refs are trained to call it is only if they see the forearm. So if they don't see your forearm, you can kind of grab and hold on and pull somebody in all you want, especially in pass pro. It's only when they get outside your frame that you start risking the penalty. And players know this, and this is just like the principle by which refs are taught. Like, they're just not going to see the holding. It's covered by your big 300-pound body. They can't see it, so you're going to get away with it. Speaking of getting away with things, so let's talk about the weekend and week that J.J. McCarthy has had since we last kind of checked in on this. J.J. McCarthy has stacked a few days, I think, that all the beat reporters have described as, really sharp, in command, accurate. Here's this cool throw. Here's that cool throw. Here's that cool throw. There were I guess, rhythm of camp, the story of camp has been a really hot start for the offense, and then the defense figured it out and got absolutely dominant. Jonathan Grenard, unblockable, just in school, no shot against him, just can't keep up. And Christian Darrisaw has been in 11s a little bit, but he's still not fully back. He's still in and out of 11s. Week one's still looking great there, but he's still sitting out. He wasn't in pads in the last time they had a padded practice. In this practice with the fight that I watched, a lot of it was all just in school. And boy, Grenard is just like, he's like effortless. And Van Ginkel having good moments on the other side. Donovan Jackson taking his couple of losses a game. Ryan Kelly getting walked back every once in a while. And so, the line, each person on the line has taken their couple of losses, and then suddenly that adds up to 10 losses, and it looks like this catastrophic thing. But none of that has been, in my opinion, J.J. McCarthy's fault. Not one of the reps that I have seen, either in this exercise that I did or in the ones that have been posted around, have I been like, man, you got to throw that. Yeah, you're holding the ball too long. Like, the timing has seemed to be proper with regard to what's going on downfield. What's happening in front of him is making it difficult for him to get to that point. So he either has to move in the pocket, buy time, bail out, throw on the run, do crazy stuff. There was one like stupid prayer that he threw up that he shouldn't have that ended up being, an interception. And if you squint at it the right way, you can start, like, if you have the right pieces of information, it would be really easy to leap to an assumption that J.J. McCarthy isn't doing as well as I am describing here. And I would super disagree with those conclusions because what I have seen is good. And that's all I care about, right? But the offense has struggled to move the ball. And you might go, whoa, well, then what's the quarterback doing? Is the quarterback doing bad? The quarterback must be doing bad. I wouldn't say that it is his fault at all. And I certainly wouldn't jump to the conclusion that it's his fault without examining it for myself. But that's there's an air of that in the articles you're reading about, how things are going for the offense, that, there's these learning there was an article from Kevin Seifert that was pretty, I would say slantedly written about J.J. McCarthy, kind of having his learning moments in what is his first is what is going to be his first, season as the bona fide starter where he's not competing, right? These moments of learning what windows he can and can't test and how long he doesn't really have in the pocket because there's a blitz coming, and how the urgency that needs to come with that. Throwing a bad pass, throwing one that could have been intercepted, going back to the sideline with Kevin O'Connell, talking it out, saying this is what you should have seen, this is what you should have done. Those kinds of learning moments. It's an interesting angle on what I think is a pretty natural process. And it feels to me, that article in particular, which I might critique a little bit, felt to me a little bit like a reporter really wanting to say JJ McCarthy is doing poorly, but not really having enough evidence to back that take up. So just sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudging at it, which is something that I find kind of annoying in reporting. Like, either say it or don't, the wink, wink, nudge, nudge of it all is like, just write an opinion column if you want to. Just go do a blog somewhere and just write a Medium post. Like, just do it. No half measures. But I guess what I want to caution you against is that sort of those leaping bridges, right? Kevin O'Connell answered a couple questions in a presser about JJ McCarthy and saying, hey, this is, we feel really good about these kind of learning moments happening. We're not worried at all about him or anything like that, but he's, he'll make a mistake. He'll do this. And that's part of being young. And suddenly the phrase "I'm not worried" turns into "they're worried and they're lying to you about it." I would just ignore that stuff. I think we are in a time of year where it's the truth tends to be more boring than the interesting times we've had in camps past, where where coaches were completely dishonest about an injury or didn't know the nature of an injury, when really the truth about any injury that it's minor is boring and not as fun to cover as the one was before. And you can feel it's a kind of pull to editorialize, to try to compare this moment to that one we all remember and all that. And really the truth of camp is that it's dull as heck. They do like 7 reps of 11 on 11s per unit. They do their one-on-ones that are really just warm-ups. They spend as much time on special teams as they do trying to throw touchdowns and doing cool stuff for the fans. Nobody tracks the stats. Nobody tracks the snap counts. Nobody tracks anything that you care about. There's no way to bet on it. There's no way to do fantasy football with it. And so you get bored. And that's all right if you're bored with camp. It's it's summer. Go camping. Come back. We'll talk to you after a preseason game. But if you really want to try to glean stuff out of camp, you have to, I think, rely on your own eyes more than any reporting. And as well as you can, right? Because, some of us don't live in the state of Minnesota. We can't get to camp. But if that's the case, then you just have to understand everything comes with a huge grain of salt. So the official Locked On Vikings position on this is JJ McCarthy's doing pretty good in camp. It ain't perfect. Be kind of crazy to expect it to be perfect, but it's pretty good. And I'm more than satisfied with what I have seen from JJ McCarthy so far. And I'm pretty satisfied with what I've seen from Donovan Jackson so far. And hey, by the way, Dallas Turner's doing pretty well. Some interesting turnarounds for draft picks and some interesting falling away from other draft picks. There's some interesting depth chart stuff going on. That'll all be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to go check out a ball game with the family? Or maybe you're just trying to get your Vikings tickets all squared away for whatever game you are planning to attend. With the money you can save with Gametime, you can splurge on all the great US Bank Stadium food out there, get a drink, maybe even invite a bigger group. Gametime makes it all possible. Buying tickets with Gametime is fast and simple. Prices on the app actually go down the closer you get to kickoff of a game, but they will still find you the best deals that are out if you are the kind of person that wants to buy your tickets ahead of time and have it all squared away. If you are tired of endlessly scrolling and trying to find your way through all the crazy ticketing places, Gametime's zone deals pick the best seats in your section for you. Just tell them the section, they will get you the seats, and they will find the best deal that they can. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Couple more odds and ends here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Some depth chart updates for you. Something that happened over the weekend that I've been cagily hinting about. So congratulations to those of you that listened this deep into the podcast. Brett Rypien appears to be really close to taking over at QB2. Sam Howell has struggled. He's thrown a lot of interceptions to multiple teams, not just when they're playing the ones. He has thrown interceptions to the 2s, the 3s, and he seems to be having a really poor camp. This obviously reflects really poorly on the trade for Sam Howell. However, the first person to say that that Kwesi wasted a 5th rounder immediately gets gulag because he did get another 5th rounder back. He slid back like 30 spots or something like that. So it was still pretty free to get Sam Howell, which makes him cuttable. Not to make it just about like evaluating Kwesi, but more to put in the context that like he doesn't really carry the same untouchability that like Kobe King would have as a person that a full draft pick was spent on. Less was spent on Sam Howell. So if he does continue to struggle and takes this through the preseason, he very much could be cut, and Brett Rypien could end up being the backup quarterback or somebody who's not in the building right now, and they could do a Nick Mullins trade style move like they did in 2022, or any other number of things, wait for somebody to get cut, see what's going on in Cleveland or New York where somebody interesting is probably getting cut. However, I think those situations, a team like the Lions, who has, I think, a worse backup quarterback issue, are maybe going to be a little bit more honed in on that. And I think there are honestly a couple teams that are a little more honed in on that. You could even see them, maybe keep Brett Rypien, and I think Jaren Hall might not make the Seattle Seahawks, and I know Kevin O'Connell really likes him and was bummed to lose out on him on that cutdown day. They would have much rather stashed him on the practice squad, so maybe a return there is not out of the question. There are definitely creative backup QB options if they decide that they are dissatisfied with Sam Howell, which Brett Rypien has been getting way more run with the 2s. They're about splitting reps between 2nd and 3rd team now, those 2 guys, with Max Brosmer kind of firmly in 4th place. That also might not mean any of them get cut, because the Vikings will probably, and I think most teams will probably keep 3 quarterbacks on their active 53-man roster because of the game day activation exemption. It makes a lot of sense to keep one on your 53. It allows you to have 49 of your people active. Or 47 of your people active. That's really valuable. So you might still be cutting Max Brosmer, keeping those guys, but Brett Rypien becomes QB2, and just congratulations, you won the job. But that backup QB contest has gotten very interesting, and it's probably the primary thing I am going to focus on in the Texans game. I don't know if I'm going to do like Patreon content about that, because I don't know how interesting people would find that, but it also would maybe be, I don't know, I kind of just want to do a quarterback video, so maybe it'll be a good warm-up or something, but it'll probably be more about some of these D linemen that are shaking things up. Levi Drake Rodriguez appears to have taken a step up the depth chart. This is not news. This has been reported since pretty much day one of camp. I haven't really talked about it a lot, but he and Jalen Redmond appear to be the next guys. Jalen Redmond's still getting a lot of work with the 1s, and I think that's just going to continue. And he looked good. I don't know. He had those couple of reps against Levi or against Donovan Jackson that looked really good. Like, he looks like he's got it down. He's playing really good football. Taki Taimani appears to be the one that's sort of fallen away, and Levi Drake Rodriguez has gotten some disruptions. He even beat Ryan Kelly on a rep. That, or at least one of the ones that I saw. He also took a really nasty double from those 2 guys, so it's been up and down. But I think the preseason for Levi Drake Rodriguez is going to be huge. If he can have a couple of good high-profile disruptions, get the vibe of a good game, build some confidence, he could very much make a play for the rotation in a much more real way than he did last year. He looks a lot quicker. That's the big thing to me. He looks quicker with not necessarily how he moves, not like an agility way, but with his arms, his hands, his technique is a lot more comfortable, muscle memory-ish. And therefore, you're striking like a viper and not a wet noodle, which can happen sometimes when you're thinking a lot about the moves that you're going to make, especially in positions like D tackle and offensive guard, where it's all about who can strike first and who can strike hardest. So that's definitely one I am watching, is that interior D-line thing. I don't know if 6 make it, and I don't think that my assumptions about who the 6th would be are going to hold. That's where that gets really fascinating and fun to watch for me. And like it's like people's like livelihoods, and that's very sad. Although many people who get cut from the Vikings are going to get more opportunities elsewhere, like it's part of it, but it's also this inalienable thing. But it gives me the same intrigue as like an elimination style reality show where you're like, okay, who's falling, below the cut, right? Or like the second day of a golf tournament where people are just like trying to get the cut. It's like got that same like intrigue to me. But one of the other storylines emerging now that we weren't talking all that much about until this weekend, where the problems persisted, was Will Reichard. Going into camp, I had this sense that like Ryan Wright was not safe. There was Oscar Chapman, and that punting battle might be, real, but also even if Oscar Chapman is just kind of there to be a camp leg, Ryan Wright could struggle and lose his job to, Matt Wiley style, like somebody who gets cut from another team. And he has, for all intents and purposes, had a pretty good camp. It sounds like not a lot of people are paying that much attention to it. So I don't know how much, information we actually get to glean, but Reichard has struggled. He's been like 5 of 6, 5 of 7, pretty much every day. His total field goal percentage over camp, for whoever's charting that, is like bad. Obviously that's just the time when they're in 11 on 11s. That doesn't count any of the kicks that he made in his individual drills, which nobody's charting. But that still is like bad though. Like when you get into the compressed timeline and having to do the entire process of a kick, from alignment, play clock, get the call, find the hash, get yourself set up, do the kick, like all of that. If you're struggling in that part, like you're struggling, even if you're doing fine in like individual drills where you can take as much time as you need for a particular kick, and you don't have guys in your face and all that other stuff. So Will Reichard is struggling. Is that a reason to panic? Absolutely not. Kickers have had phenomenal camps and then fallen apart in the season. Kickers have had terrible camps and then been fine in the season. It kind of is one of these just notoriously unpredictable things. Now I've done a lot of work on Reichard and like how his mechanics changed from Alabama to the Vikings and over the course of his rookie year. I can't really see from the resources that I have access to what he's doing in camp, if anything is different, if there's any hitch in his giddy up that could be causing this, but it will be something to watch in the preseason. So we've got a few things to kind of check out as this week goes on and then as the preseason game happens. And I'm looking forward to overreacting to stuff with you more. I will see you all tomorrow. It's Town Hall Tuesday, so get your questions in. There's a Google form in the show notes that you can fill out, and you can also confess a hot take if you want. And as always, Skol.